Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and we've got a really great show for you today. Now, a lot of you know that I was out at the Reawaken America tour in Pennsylvania just this past weekend, and I set up a media booth on top of speaking there, basically to network with people, get other people's perspectives, catch some interviews here and there. And I was lucky enough. Now, it's kind of funny. I already had them scheduled, I thought for today. It was actually tomorrow, but I had them scheduled the week before to come on my program. And then we just happened to set up next to one another. And I'm with Jeremy Sladen. JSlayUSA.com is just one of the websites. We're also going to be showing you his MBS Warrior website as well, and I think that this is really important to get into. But what really caught my eye after talking to this guy and seeing him conduct interviews and even the promo videos was this Stop Global Control Episode 1, the Players video, because there's a lot of people out there that are just kind of hap and dash and slapping together content, really repeaters of things. Not many people go in depth and do the work like he did on this mini documentary. It's about an hour long. It's well worth your time. It's very current and up to date. So without further ado, I want to go to Jeremy Sladen. I want to thank him for making the time today. And Jeremy, for those that don't know you, let's start with how long you've kind of been in this political arena.
Well, been in the political arena actively working and trying to make change in culture beyond just voting, I would say about 18 months. And then knowing even a little bit about what I'm doing about a year. So not so long.
Well, I'll tell you what, for being in it as short of a time as you have, I would imagine, with like the no budget stuff that we do, you're doing your own editing, right? On top of your own research. So, and you're doing a fine job at it. That's impressive stuff. So how did you immerse yourself in, because a lot of people get started with a phone and they do videos in their truck. Sure. And then they get the mic and they start it up. But not many people in that short period of time are putting together well-edited documentary style pieces. So how did you get into that?
Yeah, so that funny enough, I think based on what you showed, and you may have even mentioned, I was a baseball player, and when I was drafted out of college, I wasn't into photography. I had no video cameras, and when I was coming out of college, we were still using the flip phones. So people, other than low res MPEG or JPEG photos, there wasn't a lot to do there. But when I got drafted, I got a little money, and most guys go out and buy a car or something. I went out and bought a Mac computer and a nice Sony HD video camera when those were still pretty new, doing the 1080p. And I started learning like a little bit about video editing. So by no means did I do it all the time, but I started making these minor league baseball documentaries, which I never released any of it. I've got hours and hours and hours of footage of minor league guys on the buses, in the locker rooms, showing a bunch of things that, it would probably not get me kicked off YouTube, because it seems like they don't care about anything unless it's not of their political narrative.
Yeah, no, you get away with anything. And honestly, you could be the new Ken Burns of an era. That would be interesting. Like, I'd love to see that, especially re-edited now that your skills are kind of honed. So,
oh, yeah.
So let's see, 1080p, that means you were kind of playing pro ball, what, about a decade and a half ago, maybe?
You got it, man. I was drafted in 05 out of Georgia Tech by the Phillies. And yeah, and actually, I never went back and really edited that. I've got probably 80 hours of raw footage of us dudes just being crazy.
Well, that's interesting as a side piece. So you have the Warrior MBS website as well. So I would imagine that the way that you kind of get into this political arena is the craziness of the world the last 2.5 years. And you shifted maybe from pro sports into kind of building men in a time where masculinity is clearly under attack.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think these two things go hand in hand. So for me, jumping into the political and cultural arena, and I even like to kind of stay away from the word politics, because I feel like we lost the culture before we lost the politicians, but as I jumped into this world, I'm interviewing people like Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm getting on shows like yours, and I was very involved, and I think doing a pretty good job, but there's a learning curve to all this, and it's taking time, and, that's sucking money away from me. So you have to ask yourself, I guess, two questions. One, what am I uniquely placed to be an expert in? because I'm not going to be a Peter McCullough. I'm not going to be a Larry Elder that knows all the details about race. So I had to say, where do I have knowledge that other people don't have? And it's, as a coach, being coached, I've been a personal trainer. I understand competition well. I understand what makes guys, men in particular, have fun and enjoy themselves, and how to get them focused. I've talked to counselors around this country and psychologists. And typically when I ask them, what is the number one problem facing men today? They will actually say it's distraction. They are bombarded by everything at all times, coming from all over the place, and their brains actually don't have a storyline for their days, their months, and their years. So they kind of become inept and feckless in the face of the forces arrayed against them. And then, so I wanted to make help make a shift politically and culturally in our country. And I was thinking, for me, it's affecting men and getting them to come alive and awaken, not only to their own fitness, but getting their head clear, getting rid of that brain fog that comes in the afternoon, helping them sleep better at night. And then also a spiritual foundation in that as well. So for my program, you actually have to be a Christian to join. And I know that may be off-putting to some people, but I want it to be a very like-minded group in there, so that when they speak, it's almost like a locker room of guys who are patriot, Christian, American men, and they don't have to mince words or worry how they're going to come off. So I want it to be a unique program in that fashion, but there's also an educational curriculum about the hot button topics in our world, because those guys, those bankers and guys that are managing factories and just different dudes that join because they want to get fit, a lot of them know there's really something wrong in culture, but they have not had the opportunities I've had to interview medical professionals and, all those categories of culture and politics that we look at. I have had those opportunities, so I get to bring that into the program as well and bring it up for discussion.
Well, that's kind of one of the things that really impressed me about this, is that you literally have a page to click what's needed and what's not needed. And it is one of those situations where, I have a pretty large Christian audience, but I have a pretty large agnostic, atheist audience. I myself don't really get into religion, but I understand we are absolutely in a spiritual battle, especially when you look at where this globalism is heading. It is literally heading into a transhumanist nightmare, where they want to separate our nature, our biology, into a fantasy world where now reality is your fluid and your non-binary, and you can take any type of form you want in this new metaverse, and through biomedical technology and merging with machines. And the human soul, the human spirit, in my opinion, is very much under attack, and it is why we are in the situation we are in.
I agree 100%. And I may in the future do a values-based version of the program rather than a strictly Christian-based, biblical-based version. But the Bible does talk about, in the book of Revelation, talking about getting toward the end times, people are going to say, like, what is this beast in culture? Who could possibly fight against this? And there's a lot of things mirrored in later in the Bible that we're seeing happen today. But I think, at first, at least for me as a coach, not having to navigate all the different, types of people, because I think you and I will be very much in alignment on the values end of things. Like, what do we care about with the human spirit and freedom and those things? So at some point, I definitely want to have a values base that's open to everybody. But even just yesterday, somebody texted me that said, "Hey, I'm Jewish. Can I join?" And I was like, "Not yet, but it's coming."
Well, that's excellent. I'm glad you are kind of opening it up. And let's get into the coaching aspect of your life, because that's another discussion we kind of had, was the fact that I think that sports are actually important in someone's life as they grow up as a child for a multitude of reasons. One of those being the social aspect and preparing them for real life. As we go through school, often we get into little cliques. You're with this crowd or you identify as these people. But when you're on a team, whether you're a jock or not, there is a tremendous amount of personalities. And quite frankly, there's going to be people on your team that you don't like very much.
That's right.
And if you're in any type of a workforce situation, you have to learn to get along towards a common goal. And I feel like that, again, is something that is being pushed away in our culture. And really being able to talk to people you disagree with and that have different points of view and come from a different place. And I think it really starts when you are going for a championship. And maybe in the beginning of the year, you couldn't stand the person across from you, but now they've gained your respect and you've gained theirs. And at least, even if you don't like them as a person, you can respect them on the field.
Totally. Yeah. Hugely important, especially in your formative years. That is a great life skill to have, and young people, and even when you're older, we need that. But I'll say this a little bit in contrast to that. I feel like guys like you and me, now you're bold and outspoken, so it maybe it doesn't affect everybody the same. But if you are a conservative or even just a freedom lover that goes against the mainstream narrative, you pretty much always feel like you're the one that's being opposed. And say you're at the factory, or you're at the college, or whatever. If you hold to those traditional American values, many times it's like, okay, every time I speak up, I feel tension in the room. So it causes a lot of people to be quiet. That's why when people say, at the coffee shop, when they talk about, Biden's policies in a negative way, they'll whisper because they don't want to offend people around. Whereas the other side, they're not whispering whatsoever. So again, that's why I wanted a really common ground within this program, because sometimes guys need that breath of fresh air where the burden lifts. Are like, oh, wait, in this space, I can be exactly who I am and say exactly how I feel without that tension in the room. However, to go back to your point, yes, extremely important to know how to navigate and even be friends with people that ideologically may be very different from you. So no doubt about that. I'll bring up one other point. I heard this morning on actually, it was somebody Jordan Peterson was interviewing, and he said, because you brought up teams and coaching, right? Well, this brings up the importance of fatherhood. So he said the last 6 school shooters, including the 2 this year, were all father deprived. And you wonder, like, okay, man, that's so boys really need their dads, right? Because what happens is the boys get attached to their mom. The mom may love them and may support them. The mom is encouraging them to try things and be creative and dip your toes in the water. Then the boy goes out in the world and tries to do that. But the dad's role would have been discipline and commitment and fortitude. That would have been his role. So when you get moms telling these young boys, go out there and try, go out there and try, and go out there and try, and they want to try, but then they don't have the discipline to do it at home, a lot of times they feel like a failure. It's like, so that may not totally align. I think that we may come back to that later, but that's a point I was just really surprised by this morning, that the last 6 school shooters all were father deprived. And I think it's something worth considering.
Well, I think number one, you do have that role model aspect and discipline and overt failure. How many times have you talked to a young person and they're ready to quit? They went 0 for 3 the first time they played baseball, or they made the error and they felt embarrassed. And you need somebody to kind of be able to pick you up and say, hey man, that's just part of it. And you're going to get better. And don't worry about it. We're going to go practice. We're going to spend time together. Whereas a lot of cases with a single mother, there's a multitude of children. That's not the role they're there to fill. And basically, they're not going to have the time to do it or even the skill set. I grew up where everybody was throwing around a baseball or a football, and you don't even see that as much anymore. And I would say the other pushback on that is most of the males, at least 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s, would push back on medicating children with SSRI drugs. And,
totally.
That's one of those things that really has been pushed on society with, it's always about your feelings. And time again, I just see the female in the relationship more adept to actually do that to their kids. Whereas fathers, in many cases, at least when they're thinking right, push back on that.
Think about this. You're right. The female, or the motherly role, they want to help, they want to encourage, and that is an incredibly important voice. There's no doubt about that. But look at there's an example of how this is a problem that is so obvious that you're not allowed to talk about it, and that's with the Black community. So it's all you have to do is look at the breakdown of the nuclear family and the lack of fatherhood in the homes. And they say, well, that's a tired point. What we need to do is help and encourage and raise Black voices and all of those things, which, yeah, that's important. But if you don't have the discipline, if you don't have that guiding hand of a father, and I like to call it the velvet covered brick, so it's hard, but it's also like you were describing, the dad that's encouraging their son to keep going. It's going to be hard when life, knocks you down, you get back up. that's the old traditional way, and it works. There's a reason that those mantras and platitudes about lacing up your boots and get it done. That's the father's role, and without that, you have a societal breakdown.
I'm kind of glad you brought up the nuclear family, because I'm a product of divorce, okay? And those are some of the most tumultuous times in a child's life when you're watching your parents separate. Now, that being said, I also think that sometimes divorce is necessary, but the more that you can keep, obviously, the father and the mother in those roles with the children, that's very important as well. And you mentioned the black community. Well, I have a friend of mine, R.A. the Rugged Man. He's like, he's toured with everybody. He's a white guy, but he saw one of my tweets about the nuclear family, and he was like, well, do you really believe that? And I go, bro, listen to your music. Almost all of it's about your relationship with your father and how important that was and influential in your life. And I'm not, this isn't a stay together for the kids moment, but the bottom line is, when you have two people that unify and are working towards a goal set, and they can raise a family where that destruction is not there, you have the strongest unit possible in most cases, because we can talk about friends, we can talk about teammates. There's something about a bloodline where it doesn't matter how many times your brother, sister, mother, father fuck up, you're willing to do anything to mend that relationship and be there for them if you can. And there is no other structure that, in my opinion, is that strong and that based in pure love.
Yeah, and the marriage relationship between a father and a mother, that's the ideal. But even if there is a divorce, if you're a divorced dad, if you love your child and you still know the principles of raising a solid, strong son with care and with love, like, you can still be involved. So I just because you get divorced doesn't mean that you, as a dad, you have to be out of their life. And I think that's an obvious point, but it's worth stating.
Absolutely. So in about 3 weeks, you're going to be starting the next round of this program. Tell people, and by the way, folks, this is a program where apparently you can be anywhere. Tell people at least the baseline for what this program is all about. And then we're going to shift gears and talk about some of the productions that you've done and how you got into talk radio to begin with.
Sure. Well, the synthesis of the program is based on 3 key components, and that's your physical fitness, your mental clarity, and your spiritual depth. Because I think if you are physically fit, typically your mind is clear. I mean, talk to people that get headaches every day and brain fog in the afternoon. Typically, if you look at their diet and you look at how they're exerting themselves physically, it's not that good. But if you insert the insertion point, I think, is the physical fitness and the diet. So it's a customized fitness plan for each person. So everybody that joins gets a fitness plan that's based around where they're at and even their injury background. So I take the time to do that for them. And then on top of that is a meal plan that, proven through history, we know it works well. It's based around warriors from past generations and what their diet looked like. And I would say it's very close to a paleo type meal plan. And then you've got mental training that's involved. But what I really love, and you can see right there, go back to that screen if you don't mind. So the last 2 bullet points, a competitive spirit and a willingness to be accountable to other men to reach your goals. The community and competition part of it, I think, is where the magic happens, because so you get all these guys to join. I break them down into 3-man triads, and they get a nickname for their triad, which is like their little small team. Well, when they're on the app, they're in communication with that small group. Now, they can reach out to guys outside of there, but I want them to get to know those guys on a more intimate level. And in that small group, that's where you post your proof pictures. So you take a plate pic of your meals and you upload that, which takes 5 seconds, but that's your point for your meal. You take a sweaty selfie after your workout. That's your point for your workout. You do a short write-up or a selfie video about your mental training or about your spiritual operation for the week, and boom, there's your points. And all the triads are working against each other in this competition, where we have a leaderboard. We have Sunday team huddles where we all get together and discuss where everybody's at. And the first round, it was just great. But I wanted to bring up that community and competition aspect, because at the end of the last round, the physical results were fantastic with these guys. Even in just 2 months, they very much changed their bodies. But so I thought they were going to say, man, I lost 20 pounds. That was obviously the best thing. That's actually not what most of them said. Most of them said the like-minded community and the competition was what, because that was what actually drove them every day. It's like, I don't want to let my little triad guys down. They both did their workout. I've got to do mine, even if it's 10 o'clock at night. So I think that's the accountability piece kept them going strong.
And that's something that, again, we're missing in society more and more. My nieces are a big part of my life, and, they lived with me for some time. And I always would say to them, listen, actions have consequences. You don't just get to make a mess and not clean it up. I'm like, you have to understand that the things you do, the things that you put out there will eventually come back out at you. And you have to be able to not only overcome that, but change the things you're doing so you can get a better outcome. After all, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. Talk about accountability and really where we are in 2022 with the younger generation and being accountable.
Yeah, well, I'll do my best to think through that real quick. So here's what I see. I see, kind of like we talked about earlier, you get a lot of encouragement from whether it's moms, whether it's the Disney Channel, all telling these kids you can be anything you want to be. You're great. You're wonderful. You're a star. Everybody gets a trophy. Just go have fun. And again, we need that encouragement and that affirmation. But what I see happening, and I'm going to go straight to manhood here, because a lot of the guys that join this program, they did grow up in that generation where it's all affirmation and no tough love. So even in the program, I've got to really stress to these guys, hey, just because you had a bad week, just because you faltered on your diet or you went on vacation and it was tough, don't quit, because the guy that usually wins the program, probably bats. Now this is going to sound like a really good score, but it's actually, they probably do 85%. So they get 85% of their meals, they get 85% of their workouts. But what they did was they stayed the course. Even after they had a bad day or a bad week, they jumped back on the train, the horse, and kept riding. But I think what that all affirmation and no discipline sort of childhood and upbringing does is it makes people easily quit because they feel guilty. They don't know how to get over the guilt and move through it. All that guilt tells you is, okay, it's time to get back on the horse, not, okay, I failed, now I've got to stop, because that's where real failure happens, is when you just quit. So this program is very much about encouraging guys as well. Like, hey, you had a bad week, so what? I'll probably have a bad week in 2 weeks from now, but jump back on and keep going strong. And I think it does go back to your point about, the kind of everybody gets a trophy mentality as a child. That's damaging because it's not teaching how to deal with failure. Failure is a part of life.
And I think competition obviously drives greatness. Iron sharpens iron, and that's something that's not looked at and taught enough. I still remember one of the driving forces that I wanted to learn math, I think, in probably it was either the second or the third grade, is they'd give you this 100, pretty simple math problems. And if you got 100% on it, you had 10 minutes to do it. So it was a time thing. If you got 100% on it 5 times in a row, you started earning free pan pizzas from Pizza Hut. And number one, I wanted to be the first person to win. But I wanted that pan pizza as well, that was one of those. I still remember that, and it drove me to want to do better. And when you get that taste of being good at something, whether it be in academia or in physical activities and sports, you tend to want to do it more, and that is a positive thing. And I think, again, if you let people quit, they never find that moment. I want to totally shift gears here. So I watched this mini documentary. Again, Jay Slay USA. Let me show people which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, tell everybody real quick. Let me give because this website, and I know where you're going with the video, but please follow me on Rumble to see all of my up-to-date videos at the Jay Slay USA. That's JSLAY USA Rumble channel, because that not only has the ones that he's going to show you here, but it's got so much more. And I'm a true believer that eventually, if not very soon, we all need to get off of big tech and stop supporting them with our time and talent and energy. We need to go support the alternative media that right now is allowing free speech for the most part, because they're supporting us. And we don't need to be, again, giving our time and talent to people that really aren't and are going to eventually delete us anyway.
Well, I'll say this. I just hit 70,000 on YouTube last night. Now, I've had a channel since 2007. I've been doing this a really, really long time. And one of the reasons I was extremely impressed with your film is towards the end, you kind of get into the quote-unquote New World Order aspect of it. You talk about the World Economic Forum. You talk about Event 201. There's a lot of great stuff in there. I made a film all the way back in 2010 with InfoWars, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined. So I've been doing this a very, very long time. And immediately I recognize that you recognize that there are these sub-organizations outside of government that are colluding towards this globalism. Now,
Totally.
I'm with you on, I joined Rumble, I think about 4 months ago. Actually, behind the scenes, they've been really good to me. I can text somebody when I go live and they can put it on the front page. You know, it's awesome. That's a great thing.
Yes, send me that contact.
You know, I'll be honest, man. It does a little bit for my traffic, but what does better for my traffic are two things. Now, I just began working with Red Voice Media, so they post my stuff. That's great. But whenever my girlfriend, who works for the Gateway Pundit, posts it, those are usually the highest draw counts. You know what I mean? So it's always, you know, doing content that can get you on some kind of alternative media and then embed it. My thing with Rumble is, you know, it's basically funded by Peter Thiel at this point. And Peter Thiel, I like that you're shaking your head, is somebody, in my opinion, that is not to be trusted. And, you know, another one of the kind of the black eyes, also in my opinion, of the Trump administration. And there were a lot of black eyes in there. But there's a guy that's his technology advisor that Trump thinks has his back. And then we get to the 2020 elections, and let's just say he more than abandoned Trump. It's somebody who's put money into supposed libertarian candidates even in these midterms, and then when they win their nomination, all of a sudden he pulls that funding. He is very much a global player, and on top of all the things that I just said, he's also a steering member on the Bilderberg Group for over a decade, and I would say they're pretty much at the apex of the power structure of this kind of Anglo-American Israeli-Saudi alliance, right? Trilateral Commission kind of brings in the Asian community, but there's a one set of goals, and you very much see that. Google is nothing more than an extension of the Defense Department. Let's be honest with ourselves. Let's not go into imagination land. I hate it when people call them a monopoly. I'm like, it's not just a monopoly. Just because something, for instance, is traded on the stock market and considered a private company, when you have shell divisions, so you start with Alphabet, you have Google. Google is the #1 search engine in the world. Chrome is the #1 operating system in the world, or I'm sorry, browser in the world. Android is the #1 operating system in the world. They also have the #1 video platform in the world, which also happens to be the #2 search engine in the world. There's no doubt, just by saying that, they're a monopoly, but then you look into who they have the real contracts with. First of all, they're funded by taxpayer money by the CIA's investment division, In-Q-Tel. So In-Q-Tel is the one that brings them in, CIA from the start. And then you look at their partnership with NASA, which again is a front for the military-industrial complex. And what is their contract with NASA? It is in artificial intelligence and quantum computing. And at the same time, they not only created Dragonfly, which is the censored version of the internet for China, but were writing the programming for all the modern-day drones. So to, again, say this is a private company is imagination land. That is not what this is. This is
to say Google is a private
yes,
company.
or Alphabet, which is the owner. They are absolutely not a private company. They are legitimately a Trojan horse civilian system that we all pay for, and we have to pretend is a private company. Now,
let me ask you a question,
sure.
Jason, on that specific point. What about Google's synthesis when they started? Did they have all of these public-private connectivity, or did it start that way, or did the government look at it and say, "Oh wow, we could use this. Let's merge"?
So what they do is they check out all these little companies in Silicon Valley, and Google is one of 100 like it that they invested in at that time. In-Q-Tel invested in, and then as they grow it, and they see, for instance, that our little search engine is now rivaling Yahoo, which was probably one of the biggest search engines at the time, if not the biggest, right?
Right.
And then they say, all right, let's see how we can get it with email. And remember, it was like a big exclusive thing that now the best search engine in the world had its own email. You had to be invited.
I remember. Yeah, I remember.
And let's also not forget that the marketing behind it was "Don't be evil." That was literally the logo that was everywhere. So I would just contend that it was their most successful venture into that array of the internet, right? And you look at Peter Thiel himself. Look at his investments in Facebook from the very beginning. Now, you had the Total Information Awareness Network that was in its infancy before this from DARPA, okay? And you also had, I forget exactly what it was called. Whitney Webb did a great piece on it. But basically, the day that their Defense Department Facebook-like program shut down, all of a sudden Facebook went live. Now, that's not to say that the Defense Department created Facebook, but they had something similar. They invest in that company, right? And then they bring a guy like Peter Thiel in, all right? And then I don't know if you know anything about Sean Parker, but
no,
Sean Parker, well, you should watch not only Invisible Empire, but then Shade, because Shade talks about Sean Parker and Peter Thiel. He's kind of this guy that is a conduit for this, and he's the guy behind Napster. And again, our generation knows all about Napster.
Oh, yeah.
And how they took something that was you download music for free and share it with everybody, and out of that actually becomes Spotify. So Spotify is actually Napster as it got investment capital from people like Thiel. And then Thiel and Parker went in very early on Facebook. In fact, if you watch the Sorkin movie, I think it is, what I can't even remember what it is. It wasn't a great movie. But they show you basically the Justin Timberlake character is
the Social Network. It's called.
Yes, Social Network is Sean Parker. So they never actually admit. The other thing is that right before Sean Parker creates Napster, he gets an offer by the CIA to come work for them and code because he was off on some other competitive coding thing, and they were impressed with him. So I think whether you like it or not, eventually, if the intelligence agencies want to get their hooks in on your technology, they do, or they run you out. And that's kind of the modus operandi. So yeah, it sucks on Twitter. I'm shadow banned to hell. I get almost no traction with 30,000 followers, but then I've got to get a Getter, and I got a Truth Social, and I got a Gap. And
the weight of all that stuff, it'll about kill you. How do you justify, though, Jason, between you kind of feel bad about where Rumble's at because of Peter Thiel and all that, but I mean, obviously YouTube is worse.
Oh, because YouTube's the Death Star. This is how I feel about it. It's like I'm on the Death Star, and I'm trying to get people that are watching cat videos to slide into my videos. And, I've always given my documentary films for free. So if I can hook them on a video and bring them into a documentary film and then just have them share that, that's a win, right? And then aside from Rumble, I'm on a thing called Rockfin, which we're about to hit 70,000 followers, and it is an actual way to monetize your content. So, and I do want to thank, without Rockfin, I wouldn't be doing this anymore. I got demonetized almost 3 years ago from YouTube, and that was a huge hit for me. And I've been able to actually monetize this more. My problem with that is, even though I'm shadow banned on YouTube and the algorithm hates me, and now Rumble is starting to get sometimes more views than YouTube, even though I only have 15,000 subscribers over there. The traction and traffic on Rockfin is not where I want to be. So, for instance, this is how I handle it. We're on all three platforms right now. We haven't said anything that the authoritative gods deem unnecessary or misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, right?
Which three, by the way, is it?
So Rockfin, Rumble, and YouTube. And if I were home, because I'm on the road, this is all on a laptop. Same setup you saw over there. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm here because hopefully, if I had to, I could bring my YouTube audience over to the Uncensored thing. Now, if you're watching me on Rockfin, my Rockfin stuff is premium for the subscribers, which is kind of like a Netflix for creators, so you can subscribe to me or anybody, all right, and you can get my stuff. If you are a subscriber, you go over there. That earns me capital. I still get to give it away uncensored for free at Rumble right now, too. So if you don't want to give me capital, that's fine. That way I continually get my message out there. Those who like my message are kind of giving me the freemium money. And for another great thing about Rockfin is you can be tipped not only while it's live, but all day, all night, every day. So
Oh
someone
yeah.
catches a video for 3 months ago, like they like your video and they want to tip you $50, they can, and you get it right on your phone when it happens.
Let me ask you a quick question that'd
Sure.
be great for any content creator like us to hear, because it's a big question I have. So legitimate question. If you're on the big tech platforms, let's say you're streaming live to Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all that, you can go to Restream and it'll kick it out live streaming to like 6 big tech platforms.
Sure.
And Rumble's on that list as well. You can do that. But when you are uploading to say, BitChute, I don't know if you can live stream.
You can't. I talk to those guys all the time too, because that's the other thing. I try to get in as many of these as I can. I like what BitChute does. So they actually texted me maybe a month ago, and they asked what I wanted the most. And I go, live streaming, just like I've told you from the very beginning. It's the only thing.
Yeah.
See, I don't use Restream. I'm actually able to do this through software. And what's nice about it is if I want to cut it, there's one button. And I also set up a macro button so that when I want to cut all 3 at the same time, I just hit a button, or I hit a button to go live on.
You have to have a technical tutoring session with me later.
We will. Listen, we'll definitely be talking behind the scenes after this. But let's get back to the message, because we're kind of veering off. No, you're good, man. This is a fun broadcast. I knew it was going to be after I saw what you'd done with this thing. So I make Invisible Empire a New World Order defined because, number one, I did grow up a Christian. And really one of the first times I ever heard the term was in church. And I'll be quite honest with you, as I grew up and I kind of turned to atheism and doubting God and any kind of deity, kind of coming around later when I saw how evil the world really was. All right.
Right.
I thought, these people are talking about devil worshipers. That's the goth kid in high school that can't get a girlfriend. That's depressed, right? And I thought New World Order, chipped human beings, that's a bunch of Johnny nonsense. That's stuff for these people to grift on. So then I get past 9/11 and I make Loose Change with my buddies. And I realize that's
Great
a huge
film.
line. Oh, thank you, brother. I really appreciate that. So that's how I started getting into documentary films. I keep hearing about this New World Order. In fact, one of the first things that I come across is Alex Jones's 9/11: The Road to Tyranny that kind of led me in that direction. And, I'm the first guy Alex Jones ever gave a show to. He produced 3 of my films as well: Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, and Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined. While I'm making Loose Change with these guys, I'm starting to archive all these people actually talking about a New World Order and all these documents. And I'm falling down the rabbit holes of these organizations like the Carnegie Endowment Funds and roundtable groups and Cecil Rhodes and the Council on Foreign Relations, eventually the Bilder Group, etc. And you come around and you find out there's also, as we discussed before, a spiritual aspect to this. It's not just these government institutions. And I put this in my second presentation over at the Reawaken America tour. It is this aspect of basically they have their owl god, their deity, and they do their cremation of care ritual, which is one where they wash their consciousness or their soul of all the bad things they've done over the year, and to do it again on the same agenda. That's where they actually created the Manhattan Project and the nuclear program. So this is a place where real policy is being set, where weapons of sky death are being developed, and they're worshiping a giant owl. So I'm kind of wondering, when I watch something like what you did, you obviously kind of had the spiritual background. Were you surprised to see who the players were as you unraveled basically who was behind this globalist New World Order agenda?
As it unraveled, I mean, it wasn't like I made that video and that was like, my first foray into exploring.
No, I'm talking about overall when you're first looking at this stuff.
I'm always surprised, because the next new person that I find out about that's at a high level, like, a new name. So like Klaus Schwab is kind of fresh on the scene to a lot of us. And you get back into his history and when he grew up and, they make it very difficult to find his and a lot of other people's actual spiritual beliefs. But I'm going to give you one that you probably know all about already. But this was a pretty big shock to me maybe a year ago. And then you go down the rabbit hole of this particular group and you're like, oh my God, like going back to the 1800s. And so I'll tell who it is. So you've got the Madame Blavatsky that came over, I believe it was from Russia. And she started a religion called Theosophy, which really is just an amalgamation of a bunch of Babylonian New Age kind of things. And she started the Lucifer, or she didn't start the Lucifer Publishing Company. She had a book called The Light Bearer, and I think it was also a periodical magazine. Well, her Padawan learner was Alice Bailey, who started the Lucifer Publishing Company. Now, they renamed it within a few years the Lucius Trust. And you think, okay, well, that's a weird publishing company that named themselves after the, the fallen angel, the Satan, Lucifer. Well, it's actually got a spiritual meditation room at the UN in New York City, which was formerly located at 666 something Boulevard. I can't remember the name of the road, but you've got all these tie-ins, and that spiritual meditation room, which is the only one, by the way, in the United Nations, is still there. It's not like they got rid of it in the 50s. No, it's still there today. And then you look at these really high-level people and their connections to the actual occult. So when I mention Lucius Trust, if you dig into their plan for the world, they're waiting on the return of, this, they call it the angel of light or the light bearer, which again, Lucifer translated in Hebrew is the light bearer. So like you were bringing up all these different globalist groups, you got the United Nations, which everybody knows about them. They may not know about the Trilateral Commission or even the World Economic Forum. Everybody knows the United Nations. You dig into the symbolism in that place, not just with the Lucis Trust, but the big murals that they have in their conference rooms with all these globalist leaders. It is incredible. And that's when the light bulb, I think, not only goes off for me, but I think for the common man and woman that is not aware of this stuff and totally believes that the mainstream media narrative on 9/11 is legit. But you show them something like that and it just gets the wheel turning. And I think that's what guys like you and I, and you've been doing this a lot longer than me, but I'm learning that if I'm going to go to someone with some new information to open their eyes, start with something that they know about, like the UN, rather than maybe the Bilderberg group that they've only heard of like once. Start with something like the UN that is irrefutable, that you can send them the UN's website and them talking about theosophy, because they do on the UN's website. And you go to the Lucius Trust and they talk about being a proud sponsor member and the official publishing company for the United Nations. That right there makes people think, okay, so maybe these big global organizations that I formerly always thought were a good thing out for my best interest, and they've got ties to the occult, maybe Jeremy and Jason are kind of telling the truth. But start with one thing.
No, I agree. I think that's key. And that's key to reaching people that are supposedly on the other side of the political spectrum. Now, I'm not a liberal, I'm not a conservative, but you can imagine doing this for as long as I have been doing. With Loose Change, I was speaking at like Code Pink events, and it was very much the Democrats and the left that were on my side and anti-war at the time. And I've seen that completely inverted. And what I think people have lost is the ability and the nuance to find a point of agreement with somebody and something that is common knowledge to them. For instance, if I start out with, I don't even want to say it. I was going to say but we're not gonna. But I'm saying, usually when I start with that, I go, do you trust the Defense Department? And most people just inherently go, well, no. I mean, this is the same Defense Department that's lied about the war of terror for the last decade plus, lied about weapons of mass destruction. I'm like, well, they're the driving force behind. And then you start showing them DARPA and their partnerships with these big pharma companies. And now Cancer Moonshot is the next step of that. And the involvement with other agencies like NASA, which they think, hey, we're going to the moon and we're going to Mars. And I'm like, no, they're weaponizing space. And then you can show them the cover of Time magazine with Reagan on it in 1983 and say, look, they were doing space warfare then. Are we going to grow up? Are we going to act like adults? And you just take the political figures on both sides kind of out of the equation. And you focus, in my opinion, on the executive within the executive, which is part continuity of government, aka shadow government, and a flavor of military industrial complex. Because you now have not only Homeland Security, but you have fusion centers, you have the signature reduction program nobody's talking about, and you have an erosion of what once was a constitutional republic. And I think that that's a good place to kind of segue into this video. I mean, first of all, how many more videos do you have of that caliber, in your opinion?
Well, that one took extra long compared to, a lot of the videos I do are interviews with bold and courageous leaders in their field. But I do have a series that I'm very interested in pitching. You can look through my Rumble channel. It's called the Hidden in Plain Sight series, and it sort of chronicles my own awakening to a lot of the things you're talking about. And Jason, I'm nowhere nearly as deep down the rabbit holes as you are. So I want to get there. I probably need to go back and start with some of your documentaries. But yeah, if you scroll on back, you'll see maybe the last one. Okay, so there's the last one. So New World Order Explained, One World Economy, One World Government, One World Religion, Past, Present, Future. That's the latest one. But yeah, go back. And to me, it's fun because I get to chronicle my own journey in order. And one of the first things was somebody telling me, this is episode 1, by the way, and it's really short. And it's Bill Gates, and I'd heard a lot about Bill Gates and depopulation. And then somebody said to me, they were like, well, his dad was a head of Planned Parenthood. And two things happened. So one, I'm like, no, come on, that's too perfect. So he's this depopulationist. And this back when I would have thought Bill Gates is maybe not a great guy, Epstein Island, I knew about that. But it just seemed like too many dots connected in that moment. And then they really connected when I tried to fact check that statement. And I found several fact checkers, the official ones, that all tried to debunk it. And they didn't debunk it. It was like they debunked it because, no, his shirt was blue, not red. So,
he held another position, right? They'll talk about, well, he wasn't really the head. He was the head of this division during this time period. I know how they do it because
it's like he wasn't an actual head. He was just on the council board, and it's like that's a head of Planned Parenthood. You're getting into the semantics here.
Well, again, these fact checks are really, if you've been around since the 9/11 days, are the next synthesis of the debunk, right? It used to be debunking, and now the fact checkers are just the authoritative sources because you're no longer allowed to go outside of the narrative. And when you talk about Gates, Shade the Motion Picture, it's now 9-year anniversary. I have a 20-minute section on him because this was a guy that was involved in Monsanto and Bayer and all these other things, and he was talking about population control, and he's part of the Good Guys Club. I'm not sure if you know about the Good Guys Club, but this is the group with Bloomberg, Oprah, Rockefeller Jr., Soros, Buffett, Ted Turner, where they openly were meeting about population control. And it was spun by the media by putting their heads on the Justice League DC superheroes.
Whoa.
You can't make this stuff up. I often play that clip. It's featured in the film, but he was also involved all the way back then in weather manipulation. And, we talk about mind, body, and soul. These people are literally, a lot of people talk about, wanting money. No, these people want power through control of resources and what they think will be godhood on the next evolution of human beings and even control of nature around them. It's incredible.
Yeah, they want. So I'm glad you said that because we can segue back here, and I'll wrap up your initial question by saying check out my Hidden in Plain Sight series. But they want to take over our minds, bodies, and souls through meta and the whole idea of you'll own nothing and be happy. Just wear our headset, and kind of we'll tie it even into the lack of competition. Like you don't have to actually work to win anymore. In our virtual reality world that we're going to give you, we'll just make you a winner by default, which that is never going to fill the void of the human soul. It's just not. But it can fake us out for a while. And if they get us addicted to it, it'll be like being addicted to the drug, and you will lose your soul in the process. And if you don't want to lose your soul, go to warriormbs.com, and we're going to make sure that you have all the safeguards in place. I'm not trying to be no,
I like that segue. Brother, you got nothing to worry about. I like that segue because, again, I do a weekly show. In fact, I'll be doing it later today with John Fitch. And one of his big things, this is a mixed martial arts champion at the highest level, former UFC fighter, is that aspect of being secure in your physical being, right? Being confident enough that you can handle yourself in any type of situation. And he does these Learn to Fight series, but he's like, the last thing you want to do is be in a fight.
Right.
he's like, the last thing you want to be is in a physical altercation. You want situational awareness. And when you can't stop an altercation from happening, being able to handle yourself and get in and out as quickly as possible, especially on the street. You know, there are so many people that are even confused when they think about masculinity of what that actually is. They think it's the tough guy that just goes out and bullies people. That's not it. And there's so much more to it than just that physical aspect. But if you can hone in on that physical aspect and take care of yourself, that's one of the key things to having a happier life and that soul progression, if you will.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of peace through strength, which is, that's been, I think Reagan used that a lot in politics. But yeah, I mean, the stronger you are in mind, body, and soul, the more, likely you are to have peace around you, because one, people aren't going to want to mess with you. And then two, you're handling yourself in such a way that when attacks or threats come, you're able to respond rather than react, because you've got stability of mind, which sounds like your UFC friend is dead in line with that. I'd love to talk to him sometime.
Oh, I'm sure Fitch would love to have you. He also has John Fitch Knows Nothing. So if you got time later on today, I think we go live at 4 p.m. Eastern over on this side. It's usually 3 p.m. when I'm on Central Time. We are coming up on an hour. This has been a really fun broadcast. I'm going to have you on in the future, and we'll definitely do like a behind-the-scenes technical thing. Any questions you got, I'd love to answer them for you. Tell
Thanks,
people,
brother.
Yeah, of course, man. Tell people, number one, how they can support you and why they should get involved in the next 3 weeks for this new cycle if they are a Christian man that wants to kind of turn their life around, or maybe not even turn their life around, but
Sharpen up.
Yeah, have that camaraderie with other people and have a sense of competition. I know that's one of the things that I miss. The only thing I ever missed from high school was playing baseball and basketball competitively. I couldn't wait to get the hell out of there, and it is that competitive spirit that really drives people.
Yeah, well, in terms of support, I mean, the number one thing is if you've heard this today, or you go to the website, check it out. You can schedule a call with me, 10, 15-minute call to discuss if it's a good fit. Scroll down, just see that button up there, Talk with Jeremy. They're all over it. So you can schedule with my calendar right there. But I would also say if you're a woman listening, or if you're a guy and it's maybe not for you, but you're thinking of your son or whatever, if there's somebody that can't handle the finance side of it, I've got several investors that would like to scholarship people through this program that need sort of a change. Now, you do have to be 21 years old or older to join. So this is not really for kids, but there may be a war vet that needs the support. I've got a lot of dudes out there that are willing to cough up the money to pay for them to go through it to help out. So main way to help me right now is follow my channel at JSlay USA, or go to Warrior MBS and find someone or you yourself sign up.
All right, brother, this has been a great broadcast. I want to thank you so much for making the time, especially because we were supposed to go tomorrow and I would have been on a plane, and then we would have had to reschedule. This made it so much easier. Went great.
Making it happen, man.
Yes.
Making it happen.
Thank you. Exactly. When you can, guys, you make it happen. So, Jeremy, thank you so much, and we will see you in the near future.
Thank you, Jason. Talk soon.
So, guys, there it is. Jeremy Sladen. If you want to support this broadcast, here's what I'd like you to do. First things first, please consider watching my documentary films, Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order to Find, and Shade the Motion Picture. They are free right here, right now. Now, we're 70,000 strong on YouTube, but if you want to support this broadcast, we're going to start going 4 days a week over at Red Voice Media with these reality rants. All right, 4 days a week, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Thursday. And right now, you can still get exclusives that are coming out every Friday. We got an hour-long interview with Thomas Renz up over there. You subscribe for $1 for the first month. Then it's $10 a month or $100 for the year. redvoicemedia.net/Jason is how you do it, okay? There it is right there, redvoicemedia.net/Jason. We got left the meeting. And you get all that content, but you're going to be getting the second hour of video the whole time. So it's another great way to support me, rockfin.com/Jason Bermas. If you're watching there, I want to thank you as well. Guys, I absolutely love you. It's not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong, and I will see you all on the flip side.